My husband looked at me across the kitchen table one Tuesday morning in October and said, "You've been draining my account for 32 years. Starting today, every dollar you spend comes out of your own pocket." I set down my coffee mug. I looked at him, and I smiled. He must have expected tears, maybe an argument, maybe the usual back and forth that ends with me apologizing for buying the wrong brand of orange juice. Instead, I just nodded slowly and said, "All right, Gerald, that seems fair." He blinked. He picked up his newspaper. And I sat there, already making a plan. I should tell you who I am before I tell you what happened next. My name is Margaret. I am 63 years old. I live in a 2-story house in Oakville, Ontario, the same house I have scrubbed and painted and repaired and decorated for 27 years. I taught grade 4 at the same elementary school for 30 years before I retired 18 months ago. I raised 2 children in this house, packed their lunches every single morning, drove them to hockey and swimming and piano and orthodontist appointments and university orientation days. I organized every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every Easter, every birthday. I bought every gift for every one of Gerald's relatives for 3 decades. I wrote the cards. I remembered the allergies. I tracked the clothing sizes of 6 nieces and nephews so that nobody ever got a sweater that didn't fit. Gerald is a retired civil engineer. He spent 35 years working for the provincial government. He is not a bad man. I want to be clear about that. He is not cruel. He never raised his voice at the children. He coached hockey when they were small. He shoveled the driveway every winter without being asked, which I genuinely appreciated. But somewhere along the way, Gerald developed a habit. A slow, creeping habit that I didn't notice at first, and then noticed too much, and then eventually stopped noticing because it had simply become the texture of our life together. He watched my spending. Not our spending. Mine. He had a separate account that he managed himself. His pension, his RRSP withdrawals, his money. I had my teacher's pension, which was decent, and for years I had also had my salary. But even when I was working full-time, Gerald treated the household finances as his domain, and my contributions as something adjacent to it, helpful, yes, but not quite equal. When I bought something for myself, there was always a comment. Not a fight, just a comment. Delivered quietly, over dinner or in the car, in that particular tone that managed to sound reasonable while making me feel about 2 inches tall. "Did you really need new boots? The ones you have seem fine to me. Another plant for the garden? How many do we need? That's a lot of money for a haircut, isn't it?" I saw the Visa statement. What was the charge from that kitchen store? I started keeping receipts the way some people keep secrets. I would do the grocery run and come home and have a small, quiet speech ready in case he asked why the bill was higher than usual. Chicken was on sale, so I stocked up. The good olive oil was cheaper per liter if you bought the big bottle. I used a coupon, but the coupon didn't cover the tax. I am a grown woman with a university education and a 30-year career, and I was rehearsing grocery explanations in the car before I walked into my own house. I want you to understand that I am not describing dramatic scenes. There were no slam doors. There was no name-calling. It was quieter than that. It was the steady, everyday weight of having my judgment questioned so consistently that I began to question it myself. The October morning when Gerald made his announcement, we had been arguing, or rather, he had been making his opinions known about a trip I wanted to take. My university friend Carol lives in Victoria, British Columbia. I had not seen her in 4 years. I wanted to fly out for a long weekend in November, see her, see the ocean, breathe different air. The flights were $340 return. I had checked 3 different booking sites. Gerald said it wasn't a good time financially. I asked why. He said he'd been thinking about the furnace, that it was getting old and might need replacing soon, and we should be conservative. I said the furnace had been inspected in September, and the technician had said it had at least 3 or 4 more good years. Gerald said, "You never know." I said I was using my own pension money. Gerald said we had to think about shared expenses. I said $340 was not going to affect our shared expenses. Gerald looked at me the way he sometimes did, that long, tired look, and said that I had been bleeding his account dry for 32 years, and that if I wanted to spend money so freely, from now on, every dollar needed to come from my own pocket. And so it would. I spent that first evening with a notebook and my reading glasses, and I wrote down every single thing I contributed to the running of this household. Not emotionally, just practically, financially. I cooked every dinner, I did all the grocery shopping, I planned all the meals. Gerald occasionally barbecued in summer, which he treated as a significant event requiring acknowledgement. I cleaned the house. We had a cleaning service come in once a month for the deep work, which I had arranged and which came out of our joint account, but the daily and weekly maintenance, the vacuuming, the bathroom, the kitchen after every meal, the laundry, the folding, the changing of the bed linens, that was me. I managed all correspondence. I scheduled all appointments, doctors, dentists, car service, furnace inspections. I renewed the home insurance every year after comparing 3 or 4 quotes. I organized our taxes, gathered the documents, dealt with the accountant. I bought all the food, all the household supplies, all the gifts, all the cards. I maintained the garden from April through October. I called the plumber when the upstairs bathroom had that slow drain last spring. I waited for the plumber. I paid the plumber. I looked at my list, and I thought about what it would cost to replace all of that. Not replace me as a person, just replace the labor. Meal planning and cooking. There are personal chef services in the Greater Toronto area that charge between $25 and $40 per person per meal. Grocery delivery services charge a premium over in-store prices plus delivery fees. Housekeeping services in Oakville run between $30 and $45 per hour. Property management and household administration, scheduling, insurance, correspondence is billable work. Gardening services charge by the hour and by the season. I did a rough and conservative calculation. Just the cooking and cleaning, priced at the low end. Just those 2 things. The number was over $4,000 a month. I had been doing $4,000 a month of unbilled work for 32 years, and Gerald thought I was draining his account. I didn't say any of this to him. I closed my notebook. I went to bed. I slept quite well, actually. The next morning I got up at my usual time. I put the kettle on. I measured out exactly enough coffee for 1 cup. My cup, and made myself a small, perfect pour-over in the blue ceramic mug my daughter had given me for my birthday. I scrambled 2 eggs. I made 1 piece of toast. I sat at the kitchen table with my breakfast and the crossword from the newspaper, and I had a genuinely lovely morning. Gerald came downstairs around 8:30. He looked at the tidy kitchen. He looked at the empty stovetop. He opened the fridge and stood there for a moment. "Is there anything made?" he asked. "For me, yes," I said, without looking up from 7 across. He made himself cereal. He didn't say anything. I did the grocery run that Friday, as I always did. I bought everything on my list for myself, the things I would eat, the ingredients for the meals I would prepare for myself. I bought my yogurt and my salad greens, and the particular brand of whole grain bread I liked, and the good sharp cheddar from the deli counter. I walked past the pork tenderloin Gerald liked, without putting it in the cart. I walked past his brand of crackers. I walked past the beer he kept in the garage fridge. The total was significantly less than usual. I paid with my own card. Gerald did his own grocery run on Saturday. He came home with a bag of basics and stood in the kitchen looking at the pantry with an expression I can only describe as disoriented. I was in the living room reading, and I heard him open and close several cupboards. "Where's the stock?" he called out. "The chicken stock I use for the rice?" "I finished it 2 weeks ago," I said. "I haven't replaced it yet." A pause. "Well, can you add it to the list?" "Your list," I said pleasantly, "would be in your notebook." Another pause. Longer this time. I turned a page. The first 2 weeks were, I will admit, uncomfortable in the way that all honest reckonings are uncomfortable. Gerald ate a lot of frozen dinners. He heated up the kind of packaged soups you reconstitute with hot water, the kind that tastes the way the cardboard box smells. He made sandwiches that he seemed vaguely insulted by. One evening, I was making myself a proper pasta, a good simple aglio e olio with fresh parsley from the pot on the windowsill, and the smell filled the whole house, and Gerald sat in the living room in an extremely pointed silence. I brought my bowl to the table and ate my dinner and found it delicious. What I noticed, in those weeks, was how much mental space opened up when I stopped managing for 2. I stopped scanning the flyers for his preferred cereals. I stopped calculating whether there was enough of the things he liked before I planned a meal. I stopped the small constant background hum of anticipating his preferences and working around them. I just cooked what I wanted to eat. I bought what I wanted to eat. It was almost startlingly simple. I also, without any particular fanfare, booked my flights to Victoria. 3 weeks in, Gerald's brother came over for dinner on a Saturday. His brother was visiting from Kingston, staying the weekend, and Gerald had apparently forgotten in the upheaval of our new arrangement that he had no plan for feeding a guest. I had not forgotten. I simply had not considered it my problem. I made myself a roast chicken that afternoon, a proper one, with herbs and lemon under the skin, the whole house smelling extraordinary by 4 o'clock. I set one place at the kitchen table, my place, with the good linen placemat I liked. Gerald and his brother sat in the dining room with reheated frozen lasagna from a box. His brother, to his credit, ate it without complaint. But at some point after dinner, when I was washing up my own dishes, I heard them talking in the living room, and Gerald's brother said, in that way men sometimes have of accidentally stumbling into insight, "Where's Margaret's cooking? I thought she always made that chicken thing." And Gerald said something I couldn't fully hear. And his brother said, clearly, "Well, what on earth made you say a thing like that to her?" The following weekend, our daughter came home from Toronto. She arrived on a Friday evening and came into the kitchen where I was making a Thai-inspired soup, lemongrass and coconut milk, very fragrant, very satisfying on a cold November night. She put her bag down and hugged me, and looked at the single bowl I was ladling soup into. "Is Dad eating?" she asked. "I imagine so," I said. She went into the living room and had a conversation with her father that I did not hear and did not need to hear. She came back into the kitchen and sat down at the table and looked at me for a long moment. "Mom," she said. "I'm fine," I said. "I'm actually better than fine. I'm going to Victoria next week to see Carol." She considered this. "Good," she said finally. "That's really good." She stayed the weekend. She ate my cooking and Gerald ate his frozen dinners, and on Sunday morning she made us all pancakes, which was gracious of her, and we sat at the table together, and it was not as awkward as you might imagine. Gerald ate his pancakes and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on his face in a long time. Something a little like shame, something a little like recognition. I went to Victoria. I spent 4 days with Carol, walking along the waterfront, eating well, drinking too much wine, talking the way women who have known each other for 40 years talk honestly, without maintenance, without performance. I came back rested in a way I hadn't been rested in years. Gerald picked me up from the airport. He had cleaned the house while I was gone. Not perfectly, he had missed the corners and the baseboards, but he had vacuumed and done the dishes, and there were fresh flowers in a vase on the kitchen table, the grocery store kind, a bit ungainly, but there they were. We sat down that evening and Gerald said he had been thinking. He had called his sister while I was away, he said. His sister is a sensible woman who has always liked me, and whatever she said to him I will probably never know in full, but he came to the table with his engineer's precision and a piece of paper and said he thought we needed to have a real conversation about how we'd been managing things. He said he had looked at what things actually cost, the cooking, the household management, the appointments and correspondence and all of it. He had tried to price it out, he said, a bit awkwardly, and he had arrived at a number that made him quiet for a moment before he said it. "I didn't understand what you were actually doing," he said. "I knew you were doing it. I just didn't understand the value of it." I looked at him across the table. I thought about 32 years of grocery explanations rehearsed in the car. I thought about the plant for the garden and the boots that seemed fine to him. I thought about the notebook I had filled out in October, the conservative calculation, the $4,000 a month. "I know," I said. We talked for a long time that night. Not a fight. Not a performance of reconciliation either. None of that overwrought movie apology where everything is resolved in a single tearful scene. Just a long, honest, somewhat uncomfortable conversation between two people who had been married for a long time and had let something go crooked that needed to be straightened. We set up what I can only describe as a household partnership agreement, which is a very Canadian thing to do, and I say that with complete affection for this country. We went through our finances together, properly, for the first time in years. We calculated what the household actually costs to run not just the utilities and the mortgage and the car insurance, which Gerald had always tracked, but the invisible costs, the time costs, the labor costs, the planning costs. We divided responsibilities. Some things stayed with me because I genuinely prefer doing them my way. Some things moved to Gerald, including all his own appointments and all correspondence with his own family, which immediately improved his relationship with the reality that his nephew had turned 14. We agreed that household expenses come from a shared fund that we both contribute to proportionally. We agreed that personal spending, mine or his, does not require justification or commentary from the other person. Gerald has learned to make 4 or 5 things quite competently. His rice is actually better than mine now, which I told him sincerely, and which pleased him more than he tried to show. He does the grocery run every second week and comes home looking faintly triumphant, which I find endearing. Last month, Carol came out to Oakville to visit me. I made a proper dinner: roast chicken, Gerald's improved rice, a green salad, a very decent Niagara Chardonnay. Gerald was charming and Carol liked him, which she told me privately was not what she had been prepared to feel. We sat at the table until 10 o'clock. When Carol and I were washing up and Gerald had gone to watch the news, Carol said to me, "So he really didn't understand?" "No," I said, "he genuinely didn't." "That's almost worse," she said. "I know," I said. "But here's what I think. I didn't ask him to understand for 32 years. I just kept doing it. I made myself invisible by being so constantly, reliably present. He stopped seeing what I was doing because I never stopped doing it long enough for him to notice." Carol handed me a dish to dry. "That's very generous of you." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just got tired of being angry about something I'd never actually named. I am not going to tell you that everything is perfect. A 32-year pattern does not dissolve in a few months. Gerald still occasionally begins a sentence with, 'Did you really need to?' and then stops himself, which is imperfect but is improvement. I still sometimes catch myself mentally drafting explanations for purchases before I've even made them, which is a habit I am slowly, deliberately unlearning. But I had that long weekend in Victoria, and I have my blue ceramic mug, and I have a husband who now knows, with the precision of a man who spent 35 years working in infrastructure, exactly what it would cost to replace me. He has never asked about a receipt since,